Welcome back to part 2 of Refskegg's streaming class, Building the Team and Gear Setup. First, we're going to cover where you actually get your gear from, the ways that you can work with royalty, and then actually cover the gear that you're going to need. So first and foremost, unless your kingdom is ready to just shell out a bunch of money, probably $1,000 to $1,500 immediately out the gate, you're probably going to need to crowdsource a lot of your gear. One of the things to keep in mind when you do start crowdsourcing is it is okay to say no to some gear. It seems hard when people offer up stuff, but more gear isn't always better. If the gear is not going to be able to perform what you need, then it's just going to become one more burden. So make sure you are a little bit choosy and understand what gear you are getting. First and most importantly is remember, if it wants to input into the stream, it needs to have a Chrome browser. At least if you're still using StreamYard. If you've changed to something else, you might have other options. But for now, it needs to be on Chrome browser, so laptops, cell phones, etc. There is a saying, 2 is 1, 1 is none. It's usually by people trying to justify why they have 19 different knives on them. But in this case, it's really true. The cords and cables that we're buying are probably on the cheaper side of the spectrum. I rarely spend more than 20 bucks on them because if this goes missing, if I lose it, I'd rather be out 20 bucks than 100 bucks, even if it means I need to buy 2 of them. And because one might go missing or might break, I'm still only out 20 bucks, maybe even 40 bucks instead of 100 if something does happen to it. So that's why I get a little bit on the cheaper end, at least for cables. And I try to have multiples and backups. For whatever reason, it might just not be working that day. So remember, 2 is 1, 1 is none. Any cable, any piece of tech, I try to have a redundancy. This should go without saying, safety is not third in this case, so what we're doing is not so vital that we should be risking our lives. Safety should be number one. So if there's a thunderstorm, don't run a power cable out through wet grass. Don't run a power cable out through wet grass anyways. Keep that in mind when you're building all this stuff up. Make sure cords are taped down, there's no trip hazards. We don't want anyone to get hurt doing this. That's definitely not worthwhile. One of the questions I get asked a lot is the prioritization of gear and who gets the gear when it's asked for. One of the things I like to do is start with kingdom level. Kingdom gets priority, principality, baronial, then shire, canton, anything like that. But even past that factor, it also depends on what infrastructure is in place. If you have really, really spotty signal at one baronial event and you have great signal at another baronial event, maybe go to the one that has great signal because you're going to get a better stream out of it. Gear availability is something to consider. If they have a couple of laptops over there and maybe some okay streaming cameras, but nothing over on this site, maybe you send your stuff over to the nothing site. Or it could be that you have enough things to support that all this extra is going to take the production over the top. If it's court versus a competition, there are a lot of different factors to consider. One of the biggest ones is going to be crew availability. If one site doesn't have any crew already lined up and another has a full team, well, send your gear to the full team. They'll at least be able to use it. And the type of event. Eventing season can burn you and your crew out. If someone wants a 3-day war covered and another event just wants an evening court, take a temperature check of your team, and maybe the 2-hour evening court is just easier to do and you get something done and your crew doesn't burn out. Working with royalty. Royalty are already doing enough. They're doing one of the most important jobs on site. The last thing we need to do is make them also worry and fret about what's going on around them. I know we've said and will say, talk to them about where to stand, do these little things, but the goal is to set stuff up so much so around them and already created that they're naturally going to fall into those positions. And that's why we say move the pillow over instead of telling them to move people over, because the pillow is something we can control and people will naturally start falling to it. One of the big concerns I hear most from royalty is that ability of, am I going to get picked up when I lean over and talk to my retinue aide and ask for a drink? So talk to them about what you've done to make sure that doesn't happen. Go through it with them. Talk about how you can adjust the sliders. Give them a demonstration. I'm fortunate enough that our current king and queen already know what we're capable of. They've helped us build this, and so they are already aware of it. But for the next reign, I'm going to go through this whole process all over again of educating them on what we do and how we try to make their lives as easy as possible. Now, a lot of people request, especially for the on-site people, can we mic them up? And my concern about that is kind of the concern I have with USB cutoff switches as well. That's one more thing they have to deal with. They're not going to be able to duck aside to the retinue without having to cover up their mic or without having to mute it. So now they have to remember to mute it, and then they have to remember to unmute it, or we lose everything. Same thing with the USB cutoff switch. They're the ones that physically control that, which means the responsibility is on them, and they're already doing too much. If you are going to do something like that, absolutely make sure there's an indicator light. Seeing that green to blue, especially post-COVID, most of us are used to zooms and green to blue and X lines. Make sure they can see that somehow. If possible, get them to do the audio test for you instead of just having one of your crew do it. If you can borrow them for a little bit before they step up to the thrones and say, yes, that was good, no, that wasn't good, that gives a lot of good feedback for them. They will then know, okay, to be heard here, I do need that. What's the difference between an outdoor site and an indoor site, etc. When we did the hybrid event on site, one of the great things I did is I actually showed them I gave them the headphones, and like, this is what you sound like when you talk. And so they were able to get that relay and go, oh, okay, this is my level, this is my level, this is my level, and play around with all of that so they knew it. And then I gave it to the Herald too, because the Herald's most concerned. They want to project, but when there's only 20 people around you, they needed to know that. And this isn't quite working with royalty, but is something to be aware of, and I'm going to repeat it a lot of times because it bears repeating. Closed captioning. Remember, closed captioning will capture all the smaller sounds that you're doing, the ones you necessarily don't want to be captured. So make sure when you're adjusting your mic setup that you get it as on the lowest end possible so it won't pick up that chatter. Next, I'm going to talk about building your team. Now, I kind of covered this a little bit later on some of these roles and responsibilities for actually running the feed, but I want to clarify all the positions, what I think they are, and what I mean when I say them. So producer and backup producer. The producer is the primary person responsible for the event. In my role as the court technomancer, I support the new producers as best I can by trying to do all the pre-show work, all the coordinating, all of that effort. Eventually, though, that is going to start passing on, and I highly recommend that not one person does all of it. It is a demanding job if you're the only one doing it, so have somebody else take care of your awards, have somebody else do coordination, have someone else wrangle tech gear for you. Know what your team is capable and not capable of, and don't try to take it all on yourself. During the show, the producer is the one that's going to be making the decisions on how the cameras are set up, when to switch views, when to go to music or videos, and which banners to display. Now, they may have their backup run those banners as well so that they can focus on a couple of pieces, but ultimately they're going to be the ones building them out ahead of time, or at least making sure everything is there. One of their side jobs, and kind of their main side job, is they're also the coordinators. They need to let the on-site staff know when something is going wrong, when there are adjustments that need to be made, and who to talk to get the information out there. In 12th night, we had a decent sized delay and when court was starting again, and we wouldn't know that as the remote team unless the people on site were telling us. And we had a couple of different people. Again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. So we had our on-site director, we had our backup on-site director, and then I had the court liaison, all 3 of which were telling me, hey, court's going to start in 25 minutes late. Cool, now we know. Usually the producer or the director is going to kind of be the one in charge of everything. They're the ones that are going to be building up their own team and picking their people, picking their gear, etc. Now I say on-site director versus producer. It really depends on who's more comfortable in that role and kind of whose idea it was to do this. And this may very well change down the line when it's not just me taking on the brunt of the work, and it may evolve, so keep an ear out for it. One of the main things to understand for backups, again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. You need to have a backup for all of your major roles so that they can cover food breaks and bathroom breaks. And we say that that's their main job, but truly they are the sous chef to the producer's, chef. They have to work together in great sync. I was very fortunate in the Summit's Coronet. With the help of Discord and the awesome team, we were flowing very beautifully. The banners would go up right as the awards went up, and everything would come down together as one. And you need that just great interplay between them. So know when you're building these positions out, if you do have a producer, ask them who they want as their backup. Hey, so-and-so has offered, do you want to work with them? No, their and I's energy does not flow well. Now, your moderators and your backup moderators, they're going to be primarily concerned about covering the comment section, but you also want them building that engagement, working with the community, playing off of people, asking them questions, starting polls if you can, getting them to do X or Y. All of that starts building up that engagement. They're also responsible, especially for like fighting events, for putting out victory to so-and-so in this round, victory to so-and-so in this round, because it's faster than setting up a banner, especially for the lower tiers. The semifinals and finals will usually get banners created, but in the meantime, they're the ones trying to send out that information as fast as possible. Now that also means they have to be getting that information, so they need to know where to look, who to talk to, and need to be okay with making that communication. The on-site director and backup director are the counterpart to the producer, but on-site. Their main job is to coordinate all the on-site staff and communicate with the producer. They are your eyes and ears if you're the producer. You really cannot set up anything without them or without an operator functioning in that role. Now, you don't have to be a super technical person to be the on-site director or the backup director. It really helps if you understand technology, or at least how to join and troubleshoot a Zoom call. But you do need to be a go-getter, and you need to be organized. If we're presented with a problem, you need to start thinking about solutions for it rather than just waiting for it to be solved. Also, you got to coordinate. You need to understand, okay, this person's getting real stressed. They haven't eaten all day. I need to give them a break, so I need to find somebody so they can go have lunch and step away for a little bit. Or why did they suddenly disappear? Are they walking away to go get lunch without telling me, or are they walking away to go troubleshoot a problem? You're also there coordinating gear. You have to make sure you know where to find everything and what to do if something goes wrong. One of the key features is if, as an on-site director, the producer tells you, hey, something's gone wrong, your job is to respond to them who's on it, and the operator's job is to go take care of it. Fixes first, communication second. So if you're the closest person as on-site director, it's your job to go take care of it. Again, this is a super draining job. Make sure you have a backup. Make sure you can go up to court if you get called or take breaks, etc. Next, we get to the operators and the backup operators. Again, these are the backbone of it. They make everything function, and yet they almost have the easiest or the boring job. Your job is primarily to babysit gear and make sure nothing's happened to it. It can get kicked, it can get bumped. Sometimes you just gotta pan to catch the action a little bit. But most of the time, if everything's going great, you get to sit there and do nothing. Now, it's very rare that ever happens. A lot of times you have to troubleshoot. We'll lose one camera, so we ask you to jump in and figure out what's happening with it. Sometimes the audio goes out or there's a weird noise on it. Either way, you're the ones trying to do that. Also, setup comes down to you. Until we get cameras going, the remote crew doesn't know what's going on and what the place looks like. And even once we do get cameras going, our views are very different from everything else. Maybe the thrones are a little too close to the front of the crowd, so we're going to have a harder time getting that good back shot. You have to get creative. We've got to disguise equipment, tape down cords, make all the stuff so it's both visible for our spots to stand in, as well as not so visible that people are going to get annoyed because look, there's a 15-foot web tripod in the way. And you need to run cable, you need to tape stuff down, or you need to recruit children to do that for you because they have better needs or knees. And again, stuff's going to move. Fighting will shift, especially if you're on a large Eric. The fighting can move over, and you want to be able there to catch that. Studio hosts and on-site reporters. The studio hosts are a little bit easier to work with because they're in the studio. They can see what's going on. They can hear everything that's going on, and they're not roving around. Makes it a lot easier. The on-site reporters, though, are a huge benefit. They give you such a great ad, but they're a little bit harder to work with. Unless they have an audio feed going back into their ears with headphones, they're not going to know what's going on. So if a studio host asks them something, they won't be able to respond. If there's a problem with the camera, or the cell coverage is bad, or there's somebody changing the background of their current shot, they're not going to know that unless they have audio or they have camera crew. So I always recommend camera crew. It literally is just a person, even if they're using a cell phone, just a person holding the cell phone on a monopod or holding it up for them that the producer is in direct call with. And I just do a phone call to them. And that way, especially because it's only going to be 15-20 minutes for most roving reporters at a time, that's the gap that you have to work with. So a quick phone call makes it easier. And with COVID and things, trying to get two people together on a cell phone can be a little hairy. So if you can stand apart and you have one person with the phone facing them or with the phone of the mic facing them, you can usually get a lot better responses and a lot better shots. And going live can be harder without that camera crew. If we're going live, I can tell the camera person and they can point to the reporter. Without that, the reporter has to just trust that I'm bringing them into the shot. Because trying to work on a cell phone is really, really hard. Trying to see the chat and then jump back to live and getting added to stream. It's incredibly difficult, and we don't want to put that extra stress on them. Now, for roving reporters, don't approach someone who just stepped down. Pick your targets well. Don't go to someone who lost unless they come to you. They just got elevated. They're probably not going to have a whole lot of clear, concise thoughts to say. They're probably just going to have a lot of gibberish like I'm doing now, and maybe some crying. Especially before matches, be very careful if you are going to go talk to a fighter or a contestant. They need to get into a certain headspace. Some people are okay with talking before it. Some people, that ruins it. And we don't want to be responsible for somebody not doing their best. One of the great things to ask is who, what, when, where are you wearing? There's been talk about just setting up a stream for that so people can walk in when they want to, give that talk, and then they can go away, because it's such a huge hit and people love sharing who makes stuff for them and what they've made and where they're about. Try not to let anyone ramble though. SCA, we want to talk everyone's ears off. We're very passionate, so be aware, try to cut them off when you feel it's appropriate. Touring Merchants Row is a huge thing. Giving shout out to gate staff is a great thing. If you are touring Merchants Row, make sure you get the merchant name or a business card so people on the stream back home can actually find them and buy stuff from them. Both on-site reporters and studio hosts need to be reminded, especially, that the producers are going to be slow in transitioning, that when you start something, it will take a few extra seconds for it to actually kick up and catch live. Especially if you're on a call with your tech person, with your camera crew, and you bring them into stream and say go, by the time they're actually brought into stream, they may have already gotten out a whole sentence. And again, get creative with it. Do a John Madden style sports announcer booth, or a shout out, or just one point where people can go and talk about an awesome thing they did or a great fight they saw. Do a tour of all the different games going on, their different tents, especially if you have a period encampment. Get as creative as you want to. And just some general guidelines for building out your team. Don't have one person do everything. In fact, don't have one person do more than one thing unless you absolutely don't have the people for it. If you don't have at least one operator or two operators and an on-site director for an event with more than 50 people or one thing happening, maybe consider not doing that event, because it's not worth running that person to the ground in order to get this. So be ready to have those hard cut dates of, if we don't get X by this date, it's not going to happen. And sometimes that will get more and more people to start coming out and being willing to help if they think, oh, it's already covered. We're used to Gate has 10-15 people happy and willing to run it with that experience. More than likely, live streaming isn't going to have that in your kingdom or barony. So they need that extra little bit of a push, but hopefully this series will help make that easier. Make sure that there is coverage across both teams. Again, we in the SCA like to give till it hurts. We will give till we have nothing left. So as producer, as a director, as the person organizing this, you need to make sure you have backups. Even if it's a person that says, well, I can maybe do a little bit of backup coverage, cool. Put their name on a list and tell them at noon they need to go over and relieve so-and-so. Don't wait for the person, don't wait for your team to come to you, go to them. Make sure your staff are doing the job that they want to be doing. Don't put someone who doesn't like talking or doesn't know anything about the kingdom in the moderator spot. That's going to go quite poorly. Or don't put someone who hates technology in your primary producer slot or your operator slot. You want people that are going to be excited and willing to do the jobs that they're there, not just because they got asked, but because it's something they feel good about. I do really like keeping my remote staff lean, and there's two big reasons really. Diffusion of responsibility. Unless you have clear cut guidelines on who's doing what, then everyone's waiting for everyone else to do it. And we gotta wait a couple extra seconds because everything's a little bit slow and it seems a little bit faster in real life. So it just doesn't end up getting done. The other one is we are limited within StreamYard on how many people and how many cameras we can have. So if my production team is 5 people, that means I can only have 5 camera gear. And that's processional camera, overhead camera, front camera, and 2 microphones. That may not be enough for a big event, or that's 4 Eric cameras. So something to keep in mind as well. Everyone on your team needs to be on a single point of contact, whether that's a Discord group or a Facebook Messenger. They all need to be able to talk to each other. If I, as primary producer, am the only point of contact for my remote team or my on-site team, then when I have to step aside, communication crumbles. So it needs to be able to operate without any one person. Discord channels are so great. Having used them in the last one, using push to talk, it's perfect, and it makes coordination go so much easier, and it just elevates the whole level of professionalism of the event. So I highly recommend getting a Discord channel. Pretty sure they're free. I think they're free, so correct me on that. I don't know anything. Make sure everyone knows code words and keys, AFK, BRB, and make sure you all kind of use the same vernacular. So Jet is AFK, Refskegg's AFK, because I sound identical to, my backup producer, so no one knows who's there and who's not. So make sure you state your name. And in general, I like to have on-site teams consist of 1 operator for 2 to 3 pieces of gear, so 1 laptop, a camera, and a mic. Maybe 2 laptops if they're real close to each other, and a director for up to 6 operators. So if you start getting more than 6 operators, you really want a second director. And if you have more than 6 operators, you probably need a second director. All right, let's talk gear. We're going to start with microphones. This is a shotgun microphone or a directional microphone. So it's going to be really good about picking up something that's within its front cone. This is how we can be 30 feet away and still hear the king, queen very, very clearly. These are an essential piece of kit for you. Now, I've got a Movo. They've also got Rhodes, and these come in all variety of cost and quality. The ones I favor are about $40 or $50. Part of the reason is if they get destroyed or stomped on or soaking wet, I don't feel real bad like I would if there's a $500 one that gets damaged. You've got the fluffy, you've got the other fluffy bit, and you have a connector so it can mount onto a tripod. Now, always make sure you label them because they're easy to lose. They are very small things. A couple of things to keep in mind. They use 3.5mm headphone jack. What does that mean? Oh, it means the old school plugins. So trying to get this attached to a modern cell phone is going to be a problem. You're going to need specialty adapters. Trying to get this even connected into a GoPro, you're going to need a special adapter and a splitter, especially if you're trying to use that same connector to run power. Understand how those work. I do recommend 2 of those for the GoPro adapters because they tend to be problematic. Now, there are 2 types of these little 3.5mm headphone jacks, TSSR, TSR. Basically, one of them has 2 rings, one of them has 1 ring. So we've got 2 rings, you can see. Sorry, 3 rings, 1, 2, 3. And one of them only has the 2 rings up there. What that is, what that does, I don't know. I'm not an audio guy, but I know that we need to use the one that has it on both ends. So, line out. Right here is what you're looking for. Headphone jack over here is to hear it in the moment. This is what you want. Use this one. Thankfully, the Movo has nice little labels telling you microphone. So we plug that in the microphone, and boom, plug this one into our computer, smartphone, whatever it needs to be. Now, this is a real short cable. This is not a real short cable. It's 12-footer. I recommend at least 2 of these. This is enough to get you from a stage down over to the first row, because that's where your shotgun mic should be. Now, plugging it into a laptop is going to be the hard part. It needs to be a headset, not a headphone jack. So just because it has it doesn't mean it's the right one. Even if it is a headset jack, because it's got the little mic feature, doesn't mean it's going to work. On my laptop that I send with the kit, it doesn't work. It's just low enough quality, it's old enough, whatever it is, it doesn't pick it up. So that's why I recommend these. Headphone jack input to USB. Again, 2 is 1, 1 is none. These are $10. They're real cheap. They're probably going to break eventually. That's why I have 2 of them. And I also have a nice, this is only 9 inches, I have a nice 47-inch one as well. And these will connect together, because anytime we add one extension cord onto another of any type, we run the risk of signal interference. So I like keeping multiples, because sometimes they'll just work better together than others will. Yeti Microphones. See them in a lot of places. Most people have them. Streamers like them. They'll dangle from the fancy arm. They're really, really great for virtual cords, for people sitting at home. One thing to be aware of is they're really, really good. When running the hybrid court in my backyard, I could not crank this low enough to get the speakers, but not the other people attending. So if somebody accidentally kicked a table or shuffled, it picked it up. This has multiple different pickup locations. So there's one setup where it'll get each side, and you can see it on the back here. It has that. There's one where there'll be a dead space right here, but everything else around it will get picked up. So know your different options, know your different settings, and know that these are very powerful and might be too much. One of the reasons I like them, they have the knobs so you can turn up and down. They do have software that you can also turn up and down and do additional noise canceling, and they have a nice mute, unmute button light combination. Now, they're modern cell phones, modern webcams also have really awesome microphones. They are great for when there is a speaker off of court, just outside of your shotgun's directional view. So utilize them. Do what you need to. Make sure you understand what your settings are. So even if your overhead cam has a microphone, we don't want to use it often because we have retinue and we don't want to pick any of that up. But if there's a big moment and the main audio cuts out, know that you can cut back to that one. Know what your microphone setting needs to be at in order to not miss anything. Webcams. These are going to be your workhorse. I do have a Logi Stream Cam that I really, really like. It's a little bit on the pricier side. You can find them for about $115 off Walmart or Amazon or places like that. It runs at 1080p and it has 60 frames per second, which means it should be good enough to capture all of our fighting needs. And it's got a real good microphone, and there's additional software so you can do zoom features on it. Outside of that, Logitech C930, 1080p, 30 frames per second, so not quite as good for fighting, but still great for court when no one should be moving that quickly. Try to stay with the major brands. I know it can be tempting to grab the $30 one for a brand you've never heard of, but stay with the main ones. With camera gear especially, you are going to get what you pay for. Things to be aware of are Fisheye Effects. This one tends to have it a little bit more than my streaming cam does. I'd like to show you it, but it's my primary camera. So something to be aware of. Look at the reviews, see if you can catch a video that actually runs it. And if there's software available, that might make your choice difference as well. If you know you can zoom in, or you can adjust the angle of the lens or make it wider or narrower, those are great features to look for. Now, they are not rugged. They are not super durable. While most of these are pretty simple machines and a little bit of water won't hurt, or they're easy enough to cover, not like a big real, DSLR camera that's kind of scary to play with. These are still decently durable, but they're not going to hold up like a GoPro will. So depending on what your needs are and on tier, if we're going to be doing a September crown where there's a really good chance we're getting pouring rain, I'm probably going to lean towards GoPros. One thing to be aware of is what kind of plug-in your device uses. So the C930s use a typical USB, and a C930 or a typical USB extension cord, very cheap, easy to find. Most people will even have them. However, my Logitech streaming cam uses a very nice, very fancy USB-C. Now, my laptop has a USB-C plug-in. Not every newer or every older laptop is gonna have that, so you might need a USB to USB-C adapter, which again is one more piece of tech, one more thing that can fail, one more thing that can degrade your image quality. So be aware of what kind of equipment you're working with. Maybe the stream cam isn't the good option because of that factor, but make sure you have USB-C extension cords for it. This is the first time I finally got them in, and they would have been very, very helpful a few times. Again, 12 to 15 feet is probably the best. That'll get you up a reasonably tall pole or flag or just a good tripod, down under the ground, so it can be taped down so no one trips on it, and then up out of the way to a laptop. That way you can still troubleshoot, but retinue is not annoyed because you're in their way. GoPros. I don't have one. They're great. They're compact. The GoPro 9s and 10s do some really cool stuff. They have cameras on the front even. Their frame rate is insane. They can capture all of that. They're great for fighting. They are waterproof. They're meant to be attached to extreme sports people and thrown off a cliff functionally. So they're awesome for fighting fields and outdoor events, but they're expensive. They're $400 for, sorry, shaking all my stuff as I'm moving gear. For $400 you can buy a laptop and a camera and a shotgun mic. You can basically get this entire kit for $400 or $500. So what you would pay for one GoPro can get you everything else you need, and that's my big consideration for them. They are very expensive. They have these special little cover things so like the microphone can attach to them and sit up on top. We've tried 3 and none of them have ever worked. Now, we've tried 3. So maybe we've just gotten bad ones. They need specialty adapters that are expensive. They're $50. Because it runs power and audio, they do tend to have a little bit more interference. So again, 2 of those is going to add up a little bit faster. They don't have a Chrome browser, so they do still need a computer. So their ruggedness and their durability and their waterproofing goes away because we now have to attach them to something. Now, they can stream via Bluetooth to cell phones or laptops, so that might give you a little bit more ability to put one on one side of the Eric and then streaming into a laptop that's covered. Something to consider. Some hotels have really terrible Bluetooth reception. There's just too much going on, too much electromagnetic interference. I don't know. So really, I want to recommend GoPros, but I also don't. They still get a little bit of fisheye lens. Right now they don't support Windows 11, so if you end up with a donated machine or someone's offering up their machine and it happens to be Windows 11, it's not going to function. Even then, they're very, very fickle. Even if you can get the right software, get it installed, get it updated, select all the right features, they're still very, very fickle. They'll sometimes drop out and you just get the GoPro image. Kind of why I recommend the webcams. They're 9 times out of 10 they're going to be plug and play, real quick and easy to troubleshoot. Also, running Bluetooth is going to drain the battery faster. You do have to have it plugged in order to keep it charging, and it's hard to keep it plugged in and then charge the cell phone it's plugged into. Quality might drag a little bit while you're doing stuff like that. Connectivity is definitely a concern. Again, full plates of armor really mess with signals. So things to be aware of between webcam and just a regular GoPro. So this is my laptop. It was about $350 when I bought it. 8 gigs of RAM, i3, i4, i3, which means it's about as powerful as my cell phone. Really what that equates to. So, it's $300. If it happened to die, I would be sad, but it would not be devastating as a $1,500 Mac Air. Keep that in mind. You're out in a field. You're someplace you may not have control of your gear. Someone might kick it. I am reluctant to put expensive gear out into the field because A, bad things happen, and B, we don't always get access to it. So making sure we can work with whatever we can snag off Amazon in a hurry or get from a Best Buy or a Target, part of my plan. Keeping things repeatable, keeping it simple. Now, Ethernet cord wherever you can. My kit comes with a 100-foot white Ethernet cord. Again, I think it was like $30 on Amazon. It's there. If you have people that can build your own cable, awesome, build your own cable. If not, just chuck one in. You can plug into the wall. Sometimes you can plug directly into the router if you're like at a church or something. And you at least have one stable camera. And that should be your overhead or your front court. Or both, if it can handle both. One thing to be aware of, can it handle it? Chrome is a resource hog. Even that machine struggles a lot. When you sign in, make sure you're not signed in as admin unless you have to, because there is some processing delay because it tries to recover all the feeds and send them all back out. Battery. You need a spare battery to flip in and out, which even then isn't going to really work. You need a wall outlet and a power cord or one of those big honky battery packs. Even turning it all the way into battery saver, dimming the brightness, doing all those features will still only get you so far. Great for a court that only lasts 4 hours, but for an event that's going to last 12, you need to think about that. You need to have those replacements, that recharge time. And not every machine's created equal, even when they are on the more expensive side. Neither of my two fancy machines will my cheap machine or my fancy machine will not recognize the microphone, the shotgun mic when I plug it in, but I have a third one that it recognizes it right away. So keep that in mind. Change your sleep settings, your screensaver, and what happens when the lid closes. Make sure it's set to no, no, and no, because you don't want it to go to sleep and then suddenly no one remembers the password. Also, if you're doing that, make sure you charge it before the event and then turn it off, because if you drive 7 hours with it still running, it's going to have no charge when it gets there, and it might even overheat. So make sure you know how long your battery lasts. Test it out with a lot of resources running. Don't just open it and walk away. Sit there and play Netflix or YouTube video for 10 hours and then test your battery. I recommend creating a separate account, entirely a streaming user with the password that's written on a sticky note. Now, we need to be able to access them. If you're using somebody else's computer, you don't want to have to ask them for their password. That's bad security, and it's a little, I just don't like it, but I'm a security person, so that's my problem. Create a new user. It's quick, it's simple. You can give out that password. They can't access the rest of your stuff. Perform all updates at least 3 days before the event so you have time to troubleshoot. Chrome, Windows, those things, especially Windows, tends to go sideways. Just update them ahead of time. Cell phones. Cell phones are ubiquitous. Everyone has one. The problem is getting somebody to give up their cell phone for 8 hours at a time. So if you do need to utilize the cell phone like we did for October Crown, talk to a guard, talk to a fighter, or get your operator to use theirs. One problem with an operator using them is they rely then heavily on the on-site director for communication because their phone is busy. The fun thing about cell phones is understand how fast your battery drains. One thing a lot of people don't think about is spotty Wi-Fi or cell will actually drain your battery faster because it constantly has to search and switch between different options. So that will drain it a lot more. If you're attaching a shotgun mic to it, that'll drain it. How can you connect the microphone if you get a little USB-C to 3.5 adapter? How can you connect the microphone and still charge this thing if you need to plug it into a battery pack? Even using battery packs, be aware of the fact that they may not be able to generate power fast enough. Look for USB 3.5 or fast charging cables. Those tend to help, turn down your brightness, but also know Does your battery pack provide enough power to keep your phone alive or to recharge it? Recommend after you've identified how long your battery will last doing all those things, go out to the field and test bad signal. Set an alarm to notify you at 20 to 25% battery. Make sure it's an alarm on somebody else's phone, not yours, so you're not trying to run up and turn off an alarm in the middle of an event. But you want it 20 to 25% because if you are in the middle of a ceremony, you can't get to it until it's done, and they can run 20 minutes. So make sure you have that safety net to change out. Tripods. This is a real cheap one. It does have some drawbacks. It's not real good at doing the up-down. Tends to only lock into one position. There's not a lot of fine control on it. But it was 20 bucks and it came with a cell phone connector. Something to be aware of. This is probably the one place where I will recommend splurging a little bit. Maybe getting the $60, $75 tripod. You'll have a few more options. It might be able to get taller, which again, we want to get over the throne shots, or at least off to the side. Be aware of the spread of the legs, and how much space does it actually need to take up. If you're trying to stick something up behind court, that can be problematic. Monopods are great for that, and they're just one single pull, and you can clamp or tape or do whatever you need to get them into the right position. They do make a couple of different tripods that have like octopus arms and can grab on. Those are really cool. They're really nifty, and you might even be able to just stick them right up on the throne. Again, your power packs, keep those in mind. How well do they charge? How much money are you willing to put out to that? More than likely that's going to become a piece of personal gear that you're getting and not something coming in a kit. So understand it, try to do what tests you can with it beforehand. Make sure you have the right connectors for all of it, especially if you are using somebody else's. You want to make sure that you can still plug it into all of your gear. Velcro straps. Don't use zip ties, use Velcro straps, throw them into your kit. They're super cheap and you can get tons of them. Duct tape. Don't rely on other skatings to have duct tape. They probably will, but don't rely on other skatings to have duct tape. Extension cords. Get exterior extension cords. Even if you're on the interior, get an exterior extension cord. You do not want to try to put something meant for the inside outside in the wet. Even dewy grass can cause problems. Make sure you have good distance on it. A 10-foot extension cord's not really going to do a lot. You need at least a 35 or 100 if you can. You start getting to that trade-off of how much bulk do I want to carry around versus how useful it's actually going to be. There are different gauges. It won't really matter for this purpose. You're not like running a power tool off them. Ethernet cords, various lengths. I've got a 4-foot one in the kit as well as the 100 feet. Extension cords, again, USB, USB-C, 12 to 18 foot ranges so you can get up and down. Think about what happens if you have to put any of your equipment at the end of at the top of a pole, run it down, run it past where the rat's going to be walking, and then up to a table. How can you accommodate that? And again, the USB to 3.5 millimeter adapters, those things are tricky. All these cables, all these little bits, think about 2 is 1, 1 is none. That's why I buy cheap. Get a couple of them, know they're going to break, know they're going to disappear, know they're going to walk into a pocket and then show up 3 events later. People have asked about gimbals before. That's way more complicated than I'm used to. I'm not a professional at this. If you have one and you know how to use it, and whoever's going to be on site knows how to use it, awesome, rock the gimbal. Disguises. Disguises are a huge important part of what we do. We have literally stuck a straw hat and just wrapped a blanket around one, and it worked awesome. The people over in Avicall did a real great job. They actually put garb on it and gave it a little coif, and from behind and to the side it looks like a person standing there. Highly recommend it. And get creative with it. This is an awesome time to build little reliquaries or build pole cappers that can hold a camera in its mouth, or fake rocks, or potted plants, or little banners. Whatever you can do, you can have so much fun with this, and other people can join in and start getting creative and provide for it. So don't be afraid to ask. One of the things I'm very proud of, I'm sure my wife is very proud of me, this is my kit contents. I put in description, number, length, everything that I send out, I want to make sure it comes back in unless something goes wrong with it, because I just want to know. I want people to not worry about it. I want to make sure I don't get somebody else's stuff and they needed that. So that's really it for all of our kit. Again, one of the driving premises behind how I do things and why I'm doing things the way I am. So I want something simple, I want something reproducible. There's really cool technology out there to make this more professional and more upgraded, and mixing bar boards, whatever they're called. That's not me, clearly. That's not me at all. I want to keep it simple. I want this to be duplicatable. I want this to be relatively cheap. I am putting together a form for Curia to get a kingdom actually buying its own kit, and I will put that up with the rest of my contents. But your mileage may vary. I will have all the links to everything I have in my live streaming guide, so please check that out as well. And that's going to conclude building the team and setup.